seasteading is going really strong at the moment. The first prototypes now exist. There's a guy called Grant Ramont. He's been living on a seastead for 3 years, just off the coast of not Honduras. What is it? Panama. It's like something out of James Bond's space age thing. You know, and I honestly think, I was a massive skeptic. Just to show you, I was a massive skeptic of seasteading when I first heard about it, and I've had conversations now for over 3 years with, in particular, a gentleman called Joe Quirk, who runs the seasteading organization. And basically, through a sort of process of deconstructing all my beliefs, he's basically proved to me that, yeah, this is real, this is happening. And funnily enough, seasteading is one of the most perfect kind of iterations of a free private city. And they already exist. They exist on the planet. There are people traveling around on cruise ships right now. Cruise ships are private floating cities. They have a commander at the top, even looks like a bit of a dictator. They have a jail on board. They fly a foreign flag. People don't go onto cruise ships to vote. They don't go on there for the democratic system. They go on there to decide, is this a nice experience? And lo and behold, living on a cruise ship, it's not to everyone's taste, but it is possibly one of the highest standard of living you can live by. I think most cruise ships have 3 to 4 members of staff per person on the ship. The latest cruise ships cost over 2 billion. There's these giant great things that, and they sail into foreign ports flying the flag of the Seychelles, and no one comes out with guns to stop them. They welcome them in. It's like, as a kind of idea, you can see that actually, look, this is kind of working, and technology is catching up with seasteading. It really is. It won't be long before, according to me at least, we have floating cities, and floating cities are the ultimate free cities because the whole city can vote with their feet. They'll be the most purest form of this idea of free private cities until we actually get into space. And then space will become the next frontier, basically. Sea is the frontier at the moment. Anyway, the reason I tell you is because really I thought seasteading was quite scammy when I first got into it. And then I've met people that are building things. There's now 5 or 6 companies building various iterations of seasteads. And I realized, yeah, okay, I was wrong. This is a kind of thing. This is a thing. This is going to happen. This will be a thing. And maybe even in our lifetimes, we will see large floating cities. Now, 3 years ago, I would have said, nah, they're just scamming you out of money. Not true as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you very much for white pilling me about this. I made basically the opposite path of yours. So I started very, very bullish on the idea, especially with when Thiel popularized it a few years ago. But then I actually was disappointed about the scamminess of some of the very early initiatives. So I started to dismiss the concept in general. But you are right. The concept is already proven by large cruise ship to some degree. So I guess it's a matter of timing, and it's also a matter of expectation management. So you have to really understand what you want, and maybe sometimes ideology can get in the way of practical freedom, realistic freedom achievement that you can get on something as trivial but incredible.
It's worth saying. Sorry to butt in, but the thing about seasteading has hit a wall, which is that in order to sort of proceed forward, they need maritime law to identify seasteads as a vehicle that can actually be insured. This is the problem they've come across, and it's a problem of money, really. Getting authentication if you build a seastead, it needs to be insured, and no insurer is going to insure it unless it fits into the rules of the maritime law and maritime rules. And when they insure a $2 billion ship, they have to make sure that they're following all the rules. And at the moment, the problem that the seasteaders have got is trying to convince the regulators and the people, which are private companies, by the way, so there is competition there, which is good, but they are trying to convince them to categorize seasteads as a maritime thing. And that's really one of the things holding them back at the moment. The technology is obviously moving very fast, but really that's one of their big problems. And that is actually a problem of money. I think it's probably going to cost probably a couple of $1 million to get that sorted. And there's not a lot of people in the movement. It's a very sort of small movement. There are a few people that might have access to that kind of money, but on the whole, it's not that's the problem I see at the moment anyway.
If I'm not wrong, there was also a Bitcoin-related experiment about a large cruise ship,
Yeah,
like the
that
Satoshi of the Sea or something. That I don't remember if you actually bought the cruise ship or they didn't.
they did. They did buy it. They bought it. I mean, it was an idea. They bought it. It didn't work, and then they sold it. Actually, they sold it. I think they sold it for about 3 million more than they bought it for. So it wasn't a dead loss. But really, I think I think they bought it, and then inflation basically. I think during COVID,
All right,
by the end of
they
COVID, they've
escaped,
made.
they escaped inflation with a cruise ship.
Yeah, exactly. They stored their value in it, but I think it was an. I think this is the problem with those kind of very large ideas. It's easy to maybe grok the idea, but the reality is completely different. Joe Quirk, the guy that pretty much is pushing the whole seasteading movement at the moment. He runs the Seasteading Institute. He's been at it for years. I've got a lot of respect for the guy. He keeps on ploughing on. He keeps on going. He may not even see the results in his lifetime, but it's obvious when you speak to him. He's been on my podcast about 3 times. Every single time I come away more sure that this thing is going to happen. And also, the thing about seasteading, it's a precursor to space travel. If you believe in space travel, whatever happens in space, especially in the governance space, as in how are you going to govern colonies in space? I think they will have tried it out on seasteads already, because it's the newest frontier, and like I'm a sort of Lockean property rights kind of person. I believe that if you fly to Mars and create a place on Mars, that's yours. But really, the UN doesn't think that. The UN thinks space belongs to them or to nobody, but that obviously means to them. So like there's a lot of really interesting governance kind of problems ahead, and seasteading is basically addressing a lot of them full on. It's literally like, here's us, we're independent. If you don't like us, we're going to go over there, and short of just bombing them and sort of like with bombers and blowing them up, there's not a lot that you can do to stop a seastead once it's working, because there's parts of the ocean which nobody, well, you could claim them, I suppose. All the nations of the world might get together and say, look, this is not cool. They're doing whatever they want. But I'll be honest with you, Giacomo, I have some friends that work in let's say with very wealthy people who have boats, and I'm talking boats that have 60 staff on them. And those people live outside the law, 100%. They travel around the world. They go from port to port. They do this, they do that. But really, they live completely above the law. They have a group of friends, which kind of, they trade between each other, in strange ways. They follow their own rules, and that is the way it is. I'm not saying that's something I advocate for. I'm just saying it's something that a lot of other people have cottoned on to as well. No one owns the sea. It's a frontier. Go on.
Another interesting precedent is the Scientology guy, is Renaba, right? He was like escaping from tax authorities, U.S. tax authorities for years, living on this flotilla, crossing the sea without the IRS ever catching up for several years. So there are there are epic precedents to this theory. So yeah,
Sure.
your point would be that technology innovation can make these more viable and more practical, and economic innovation can make this sustainable. And I guess probably something that could improve the situation that I was familiar with a couple of, maybe 10 years ago, is that probably people are becoming a little bit more adversarial. I remember people thinking, if this is legal, we are fine. while, as you say, the governments can actually do whatever they want. And if something becomes big enough, they will just change the regulation underneath you in order to stop you. I remember a couple of people have been arrested I think it was Thailand, with a small homesteading experiment. They were
Yeah.
actually risking life imprisonment if nobody intervened. So the nation states are unpredictable to a degree. So you can be naive about the legality of something. You have to be adversarial, and you have to also think about the fact that the fiat law is dynamic, and it will come after you. So, but
In the
thank you.
case,
I feel more white pill now.
in the case of the situation you're talking about in Thailand, yes, the Thai authorities broke the law because the seastead in question was outside of Thai sea space, but they still came in and shut it down.
Yeah.
There's Joe Quirk's just written a long book about that. She's going to be coming out soon. It's an absolutely astonishing story. It's such an interesting story. What I wanted to say, maybe to finish as well, was what basically, you know, one of the cruxes of this whole thing is this idea of the frontier, and what are frontiers? Where are they? How do we find them? You know, there's not many of them left, but there is a frontier attitude. You know, the US is a great example of the frontier attitude. We are probably frontiers people in many senses. I certainly feel like one. Hunting for new frontiers, to basically populate them. The internet once was a frontier. It's now got so many people fighting over trying to control it. This is just the kind of nature of the human experience, I think. I think all you need to do is choose which side you're on. And I think most of us here are on the side of freedom, and we pick that side. So that's the side we work towards. But there's no end goal here. You never end up in a free place. You're always working to have freedom. That's my experience. And in my case, yeah, I love new frontiers. I love these ideas. I'm just interested in the freedom aspect. If living at sea gives you the freedom you want, great. Living in a jurisdiction in Honduras does great. If it's an intentional community in a quiet spot in the US that no one knows about, great. You go for it. But I think you're right, especially since what happened in 2020 and the COVID experience. Many more people have started asking the question, where do I go where I'm treated best? Where do I go? And it's amazing how many people. And soon we're going to have ID cards in the UK. And people are going to be asking themselves that same question again. Hold on a minute. I may not even be able to get out of this country without losing half my wealth, or even just being told I can't go to that country. So it's going to radicalize another set of people. And I think in the end, you know, in my experience at least, the state radicalizes everyone, because basically they're trying to control you, and I don't think humans really like to be controlled. So the movement that we're involved in here and the Bitcoin movement, they're all part of the same plan. The same plan is finding more freedom than you've actually got necessarily, or more freedom for others. Not necessarily ultimate freedom, but just another stage, a bit more freedom. And if that's the case, I think that's all good.